Welcome to this video called Newspaper Search Secrets, Name Variants, and Spelling Tricks for Genealogists. I love to talk about the different spellings and name variant tricks that you can use when searching for your ancestors in newspapers. And in this quick video, I'm going to show you 15 different ways that you could be searching to kind of expand your search and look for your ancestors in different ways based on their name and spelling in newspapers. So the first one I'm going to talk about is common spelling variations. You might even call it uncommon spelling variations. So I'm going to show you a couple of different examples here. This is an example of two of my surnames that I search for, and both of these I have found spelled multiple ways. The Shortemeyer, it's Shortmeyer in this instance, is one I have found spelled probably 6 or 7 different ways in newspapers. And so you really want to try those different variations. Example, I might have seen an SCH. I might have had an E after the T. Meyer might have been spelled with an EI instead of EY. So try those different variations of surnames, particularly that you might have some luck finding different ways of spelling it in newspapers. It could have been the person that was doing the newspaper did not know how it was correctly spelled. So trying those in lots of different ways is important. And this is one, and really with any of these variations, you really want to kind of track what you've searched so you're not kind of backtracking over your research. So when you've searched away, maybe make a note that you've tried that and where you've tried that particular search. This is another example of a surname in my family, Sherman, that again, I've seen this probably 4, 5, 6 different ways spelled in newspapers. So, and think about too how they were spelled, not only how you've seen them in newspapers, but maybe how you've seen them on records in different spelling variations. The next example is nicknames. This was very popular. So my ancestor's name was Elizabeth. In this particular newspaper, she is showing as Lizzie, but it could have been Lizzie, Liz, Beth, Eliza, Bessie, among many other variations that there might have been nicknames for an Elizabeth. So think about a nickname that an ancestor might have been called that you might find in a newspaper. Abbreviated names was very popular. A lot of times newspapers had kind of a specific length or restraint to the number of characters that could be used, and so abbreviated names were popular. This is an example of a George W. Gilland, and you can see that it's GEO is the abbreviation, and I've given some examples of abbreviations I've seen with ancestors over here. There are lots more, but these are some just to kind of get you thinking. And when I'm looking at this, thinking about how I might search for this, if I did an exact name search for George Gilland, this never would have shown up. So thinking about how, we'll talk about middle initials in just a minute, but thinking about how those shortened abbreviated names can make a difference when you're looking for mentions of newspaper ancestors in newspapers. Middle names. This one I'm always fascinated by. I have this example I have here on the left is my great-grandfather, one of my great-grandfathers, William Warder Hamilton, but many times in the newspaper he was depicted as Warder Hamilton. And I have 2 others in this newspaper clipping. My great-grandmother and her mother both. Her name was Sally Disney Bird, but more often than not, she was referred to as Disney, so I find her like that in the newspaper a lot of times. And then her dad's name was William Lee Bird, but he often went by Lee, and so this is her mother as a married Mrs. Lee Bird here. So trying those different variations of middle names is important as well. You never know when they could have been mentioned as the middle name. This one is super tricky. So this one is initials only. And, I had the one back here that was the GEOW Gilland. Middle initials can be tough because there are different ways they can be punctuated, different spacing options. The letters are together, the letters are apart. So try lots of different variations of this. This is an RP Hamilton that I have here. But you can see these are the different ways that I have seen initials used for this one person. I've seen Robert P. Hamilton. I've seen Robert abbreviated P. Hamilton, R. Porter Hamilton with the middle name there, and then just initials. So think about different just variations of how you can do punctuation and spacing when it comes to initials with family members. Another one, I enjoy this one a lot. This one is, I call it the inverted name order. So this is a very common type of newspaper clipping that could be found in the early 1900s. Advertised letters that were unclaimed at post offices, and sometimes those listed people in an inverted name order. So instead of finding Nora Salhoff, you would have found Salhoff, comma, Miss Nora. So looking at ways that you can kind of change that up a bit. See here, we've even got those initials that I was talking about before. Some initials, this one is an Ed, maybe an Edward, but it looks like it's an abbreviation because it has a period here. So thinking about how you can see those in inverted name order. And I've given you a list of just some of the places where these can show up. So the letters remaining unclaimed at the post office, tax lists, voter registration, jury lists, legal notices, military rolls, school rosters, church or club rosters, hotel arrivals, one of my personal favorites, ship passenger list, and sports lineups. So you might find the names kind of flipped in those instances. Married woman formats. So I like to call this search the trio because I think of it in kind of three different ways when I'm looking for women. I am going to search her by a maiden name. I might search her by a maiden and a married name because sometimes I will see both names mentioned. Just her married name or a Mrs. and a husband. So the Mrs. and the husband example that I have here, it doesn't mention her first name. It is an obituary for her, but it just has Mrs. George Gilland. So I do not know a first name based on just this particular newspaper clipping. So when you're looking for those married women, look in lots of different ways for different surnames for her. Maiden names, married names, and even a Mrs. with just her husband's name. Titles are another thing that are often found. This is one of my favorite ones that I found for my great grandma. Here she is again, Disney. But you can see Madame, Miss, Mr. You can have a widow listed, but look for those titles as part of their names. See here, we don't even have names for the Russell and Meek women. So think about using those titles in your searches when you're trying to find ancestors. Rank is another example of, I kind of think of these as together, a title, and then the ranks are kind of similar to that. So I've listed some. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but I've got some examples here that you could search for. The big thing that is important to think about when you are doing ranks in particular, they had abbreviated versions. So you might have private William Edward Gilland, or you might have just a PRIV period as the abbreviation. So could be lots of different variations for this one. And I really want to make note how many different ways you can see, again, things that we've talked about, things we're going to talk about in this short video. But here you have William E. Gilland, so you have his middle initial included here. Here you have William abbreviated, but Edward is written out. So make sure you are thinking about with the rank abbreviated versions and then all of those different variations of names that could be there. Occupational is another one, and I have on this one as well. Don't forget the abbreviated versions because again, you might have doctor, surgeon, coroner, attorney, notary, justice of the peace, reverend, sheriff. I mean, there are so many others that you could have. And it might be listed with the full occupation written out, or it could be like this one here in this newspaper clipping where we have doctor as the abbreviation. So thinking about these different ways that people might have been listed in newspapers and the variations. I really like this particular one because this one is, not necessarily, a variant of the name, but this is a great one that I have found frequently for ancestors when it's talking about where they're located. And this one can really help you pinpoint the right ancestor based on location. So this one is Henry Hanekamp, not a very common name. So that one doesn't necessarily apply to this situation. But in others, if you had a very common name, Henry Smith, for example, and you were looking for one that was specifically in the St. Maurice area, that is telling me that Henry Hanekamp of St. Maurice, and it's giving me that information. It's placing him in a location. So I do like these examples of this phrasings that you can use to find ancestors. This is another example of one, near this place. This particular one, you would need to know what the newspaper was, the location of it, so that you would know when it's talking about near this place, you would know the location it was talking about, what it meant near this place. Relationship phrases, these are always so very helpful. Many times you'll find these in obituaries, but you can find them in other articles too. This one is someone sick, but you might have of her father, son of, widow of, consort of, that is really going to help explain relationships of people. So this one, I just find this so interesting and so very typical. This one is talking about a female. And we don't know who this female is, but we do know some things about this female. She is the wife of Henry Bushing Jr., and they are at the home of her father, George Gilland. So we know a maiden name for her, we know her dad, and we know who she is married to. So this is a way to kind of put relationships of people in order by looking for those different variants of relationships. Marriage formats, you find this often in society pages. I love this. These two examples side by side, I think, are just classic, because when you're searching for these marriage formats in society pages, there really is no rhyme or reason to whose name is first. So for instance, in this example here on the left, Winning Honert is the female surname, male surname. So female, male. And in this example over here, we have the male, female. So they flipped it. So when you're looking for those two surnames in a marriage format, potentially, think it could be both ways. So try both options when you're searching. A compound name. This is another example of an ancestor of mine. I've got some examples over here, just different variations of how you might find a compound name. So Von Poel is a surname in my family line, and I have seen this. Not only have I seen the Poel spelled multiple different ways, I've also seen it as is showing in this particular article, Von space Poel, but then I've also seen it Von Poel and there's no space. So think about if a name potentially was kind of a compound name, think of it apart and think of it together, because those might be two different ways it's mentioned in newspapers. And then one of my favorites is just plain wrong. And sometimes these are just so hard because you find these by accident, and in this particular instance, for both of these articles, I was lucky because I found the Lizzie Ertl ancestor and the marriage because I found Lizzie Ertl, and you can see she's in both of these articles, but her husband, or who she was marrying, is showing up. His last name was actually Gilland. So this one's close here, but this is a D should be on the end of this, and this one is just way wrong for this particular one. So this one is tough because it could just be plain spelled wrong, and a lot of times you have to find these by finding someone else in an article if you're lucky. So think about that when you are searching as well. So one thing to mention in the video description for this, there is a checklist of all of these different kinds of spelling variations and name variants that I've talked about in this quick video. And there's also a one-page reference guide. So make sure you check out the video description and grab those handouts to help with your search. And good luck finding those spelling variations and name variants.